I sat in the polished waiting room of Henderson Blackwood and Associates, a fortress of mahogany and marble where wealth spoke in whispers and judgment glared down from oil portraits on every wall. The air smelled faintly of leather old books and expensive entitlement. My palms were cold, but my fingers curled steadily around the slim gold band on my finger. Dad's ring. Heavy smooth with his initials engraved inside. A tiny detail invisible to anyone else, but to me it was everything, a reminder I wasn't here begging for scraps. Across the room, Diane sat like a queen in exile. Perfectly tailored dress, flawless French manicure, her Hermes clutch perched precisely on her lap. Her children Brandon and Chloe flanked her like smug courtiers. They scrolled casually on their phones, exchanging whispers loud enough for everyone to hear but pretending it was private. Brandon chuckled, holding up his phone for Chloe to admire. "I'm buying that yacht we saw in Miami, the one with 3 decks." Dad would have approved. Chloe tossed her platinum hair back, her voice dripping with privilege. "Forget yachts. I'm thinking Hamptons. Maybe something tasteful, 8 bedrooms minimum." Their laughter was light, airy, and sharp as glass. It carved right into me. They didn't even pretend to care who heard. Diane's gaze flicked toward me, cool and cutting. Then she leaned closer to her children, her words a stage whisper meant for my ears. "I don't know why Amanda even showed up today. Harold made everything clear before he passed. Amanda, that was me." My fingers traced the band of Dad's ring, the metal warm now from my touch. She didn't even call him my father, just Harold, like I was some outsider who'd stumbled in off the street. The receptionist appeared at last, all professional polish but tight-lipped. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now." Diane rose with regal grace. The click of her designer heels on the marble floor echoed like a metronome, counting down to my humiliation, or so she thought. Brandon and Chloe followed, practically radiating smug entitlement. I moved last, deliberately slow. Not because I was cowed, because I wanted them to notice I wasn't racing to catch crumbs from their banquet. The conference room was vast, the table a slab of dark mahogany polished to an obscene shine. Heavy folders waited before James Blackwood, a man who looked as though he'd been carved from the same wood as the somber portraits outside. "Please, everyone." Blackwood said, his voice smooth but somehow electric. "Have a seat. Coffee, water. This may take a while." Diane waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Let's get this over with. I have a meeting with my financial advisor at 3. Every muscle in my body was tight, but my face remained still. I kept my eyes on the folders, noting how they were stacked. How deliberately Blackwood moved, almost as if he were savoring what came next. First, he began flipping open the top folder with slow precision, my condolences on the loss of Mr. Harold Morrison. He was a client for over 30 years, and, yes, very sad. Diane cut in briskly, but about the estate. Her impatience wasn't new. It had always been this way. She ran the narrative, she edited out what didn't suit her, she pretended sentiment was inefficiency. But even she couldn't conceal the flicker of anticipation in her eyes, nor the way Brandon and Chloe practically vibrated in their seats. They thought they were minutes away from inheriting their kingdom. Blackwood's gaze swept over the papers. "Let's begin with Mr. Morrison's last will and testament, dated 5 years ago." A beat passed. Then I spoke softly, but my voice was steady. "Wasn't it updated after their wedding?" Diane's laugh was razor-sharp, polished to perfection. "Oh, Amanda, you don't understand how these things work, do you? Harold and I revised everything after we married. We ensured the estate stayed with the immediate family." The phrase immediate family tasted sour in my mouth. I thought of all the times she'd locked me out of dinners, intercepted Dad's calls, rewritten history so thoroughly, even I sometimes doubted my place. Her voice was soft but cutting. The people who were there for him, not the daughter too busy playing charity worker to visit. I said nothing, but inside every word landed like a slap. Blackwood cleared his throat delicately. "Shall we proceed?" Diane's nod was almost imperceptible. "Please do. I'm sure you'll find everything quite straightforward." Straightforward betrayal, that was Diane's specialty. As she sat back perfectly composed, I felt something shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable. The faintest curl at the corner of Blackwood's mouth. He turned a page slowly. "The estate according to this will is indeed divided among Mrs. Morrison and her children, with a small token left to charity." Brandon exhaled audibly, relaxing into his chair. Chloe leaned forward, triumphant. But I stayed utterly still. Blackwood's next move was so deliberate, so weighted that even Diane noticed. He reached for a second folder, thicker, older, and slid it onto the table with a soft thud. And yet he said, "There's another matter to review, one that predates this will." Diane's smile wavered for the first time. "What is that?" she asked, her tone sharp. Blackwood looked straight at her. "Mrs. Morrison, do you know what a revocable living trust is?" Silence, heavy-loaded silence. Diane hesitated too long, then recovered. "Of course, it's A financial vehicle. Very good, Blackwood replied. His smile now fully formed, but it wasn't friendly. Then you'll understand when I explain that Harold Morrison established the Morrison Family Trust 28 years ago for his only child, Amanda. The color drained from Diane's face so fast I could almost hear the blood rushing from her veins. Behind her, Chloe's perfectly lacquered nails tapped the table nervously. Brandon froze mid-scroll on his phone. Blackwood's next words were soft, almost gentle, but every syllable landed like a blow. That trust, he said, was structured to transfer all assets directly to Amanda Morrison upon her 38th birthday or Harold's death, whichever came first. Silence thundered in the room. Diane's lips parted, but no sound came out. And then Brandon whispered hoarsely, "How much?" Blackwood's gaze didn't waver. $57 million as of today. My pulse was calm now, steady as a metronome. I touched Dad's ring again, running my thumb over the engraving. This was the moment I had waited for. But what I was about to do next would destroy them completely. The weight of Blackwood's final words still hung in the room like thick fog. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Diane's carefully curated composure was starting to crack around the edges, a single tremor in her perfectly manicured fingers as they clutched the armrest. Chloe and Brandon exchanged uneasy glances. The self-assured entitlement they'd walked in with was slipping, replaced by confusion and dawning dread. And me, I sat still, the quiet center of the storm. My fingers traced Dad's ring cool and heavy against my skin, grounding me in this surreal moment. Blackwood adjusted his glasses and slid a thick folder across the polished mahogany table toward me. The leather smelled faintly of age and care, a reminder that while Diane had controlled the narrative all these years, she hadn't controlled this. "This is a full accounting of the Morrison Family Trust," Amanda Blackwood said gently. His use of my name, not Miss Morrison, not some cold formality, felt deliberate, respectful. Diane's voice sliced through the stillness. This is impossible," she stammered, but her eyes darted across the room, no longer filled with her usual venom. Now they searched maybe for a loophole, maybe for rescue. It was Brandon who cracked first. "Wait, we've been living in that house," he said, his voice rising with panic. "Driving his cars? Spending—" Blackwood cut in smoothly. "Amanda's assets. All of them transferred automatically upon her 38th birthday. 14 months ago." I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting those words sink into Diane's perfectly arranged world. For years, they had spoken as if I were an afterthought, a nuisance, a loose end. But today, every chair they sat in, every glass they drank from, every dollar they'd spent, was mine. The symbolism was not lost on me. The legacy they had mocked, the daughter they dismissed as soft, distracted, irrelevant, had quietly inherited the very foundation of their lives. And then came the next moment I had been waiting for. A soft knock at the door. Blackwood's assistant, Ms. Carter, stepped in. A woman Diane had barely acknowledged earlier, too absorbed in her own self-importance. Her presence now was calm, efficient. "Mr. Blackwood, said the keys and documentation you requested." She crossed the room and placed a heavy envelope in front of me. The envelope was sealed, but the weight of it, the clink of keys inside, was unmistakable. Blackwood's smile was thin but precise. "Amanda now has immediate access to all properties, vehicles, and accounts associated with the Morrison Family Trust. Effective today." Diane froze, her mouth working soundlessly as she processed the meaning. Chloe, always quicker to panic than to think, blurted, "That house, Dad promised it would stay in the family. We made plans." Plans built on sand. But it wasn't just about property. It was about control, about the family hierarchy they had lorded over me since childhood. In this moment, that hierarchy flipped completely, and they knew it. But I wasn't finished. I lifted the envelope gently, fingers brushing the smooth paper, feeling the cold metal weight inside. I let the silence stretch just a little longer, savoring their discomfort. Then I spoke, my voice quiet but steady. 14 months, Diane. 14 months you've been living in my house, driving my cars, planning your yacht purchases and Hampton's mansions, all on money that was never yours." Diane's mask finally shattered. "This isn't fair," she hissed. That word fair almost made me laugh. The hypocrisy. For years, fairness hadn't mattered when I was excluded from family gatherings, mocked as a failure, dismissed as irrelevant. Now suddenly fairness mattered, because their empire was dissolving beneath their feet. Blackwood didn't miss a beat. "If you have questions about fairness, Mrs. Morrison," he said dryly, "I suggest you consult your late husband's legal counsel." Harold was very specific in his wishes. And then he added, twisting the knife with perfect professionalism, "Amanda has graciously allowed you to remain for 14 months already. That grace ends today." Diane swayed slightly as if the very ground beneath her were unsteady. But I wasn't here just to savor the victory. I had been preparing for this moment far longer than they realized. I leaned forward, resting my elbows lightly on the cool surface of the table. "I'll give you 72 hours to vacate the house," I said evenly. "I want the cars back in the garage." The credit cards canceled immediately. Brandon sputtered, "You can't just throw us out." But I could, and we all knew it. Chloe crossed her arms, defiance giving way to disbelief. Where are we supposed to go? The irony was almost poetic. For years I had been made to feel unwelcome in the home that was supposed to be mine too. Now they were about to experience what it felt like to be pushed out. And as Diane opened her mouth again, undoubtedly ready to spit some bitter retort, Ms. Carter stepped forward. "Actually, Mrs. Morrison," she said smoothly, "there's one more thing." She handed Diane a smaller envelope, this one marked with a seal I recognized instantly. Dad's seal. The weight of the moment struck me like a physical blow. Whatever was in that envelope, it was from him. Blackwood leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Harold left a personal letter for you, Diane. He instructed me to deliver it today, at this precise moment. The timing was no accident." Diane's fingers trembled as she took the envelope. Her face had gone pale, her lipstick too bright against her blanched skin. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange pity for her. But it was fleeting. She had authored this fate long before today. I didn't move as she broke the seal with shaking fingers, slid the letter out, and began to read. And as her eyes scanned the page, I watched her expression change from anger to shock to something else entirely. Fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. I couldn't see the words, but I knew Dad well enough to know he would have left something devastating. Blackwood didn't interrupt. Neither did Ms. Carter. For a long moment, Diane sat frozen, holding that letter like it burned her fingers. Then her lips parted and the color drained from her face completely. But before she could speak, I stood. I slipped Dad's heavy ring off my finger, holding it gently in my palm. The engraved initials caught the light, the faint grooves a reminder of everything he had built and everything he had chosen to leave for me. And then I leaned forward just enough so Diane could see exactly what I was about to say. "Whatever's in that letter," I said quietly, "I already know." The room went deathly silent. And then I added just as softly, "But I want to hear you say it." Diane sat there, the letter trembling in her fingers, her knuckles gone white against the fine stationery. The seal Harold had left on that envelope was already broken, but the words inside were breaking something else entirely, the facade she'd spent decades perfecting. I kept my gaze locked on her, steady and almost serene, though my pulse thudded beneath my skin. It felt as if I could hear every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every nervous shuffle from Chloe and Brandon beside her. They leaned in too desperate to catch a glimpse of what their mother had just read. But Diane's grip on the letter tightened. She wasn't about to share. Yet. Across the polished table, Blackwood sat back in his chair, fingers steepled his expression. Unreadable, but with that same faint glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. And beside him, almost silent but utterly present, was Ms. Carter, the assistant Diane had ignored until she delivered the keys and documentation that dismantled Diane's illusions in a single afternoon. I let the silence stretch, let it thicken the air in that grand room. Finally, I spoke again, my voice soft but firm. "Go ahead, Diane. Read it out loud. For them. For Chloe and Brandon." My thumb stroked Dad's ring again, its engraved initials grounding me like an anchor. "For everyone who still thinks you had this all figured out." Diane's lips trembled. For a brief second, I almost thought she wouldn't. But pride and panic collided, and pride won. Her voice cracked at first, but she straightened, lifting her chin in that familiar icy posture. Then she began to read. To Diane, she started, then stopped, swallowing hard. A pause long enough that Brandon snapped, "Mom, what is it?" But she ignored him and kept going, the words falling into the heavy air like pebbles into deep water. "If you're holding this letter, it means the trust has already transferred to Amanda as intended. It also means you've discovered what you could never control." Her throat bobbed visibly as she struggled to continue. "You married me for what you thought you could manage, but you never truly understood what I was protecting." Chloe was fidgeting now, biting her perfect manicure, her confidence fraying at the edges. Brandon leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowed. And still Diane read on each line another slice. "I saw what you were long before Amanda did. I watched as you isolated her, shut her out of family dinners, diverted my calls, manipulated her visits. I let you believe you'd won. But I made sure you would never have this legacy." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I kept my face still, but inside I was on fire. A lifetime of dismissal, of biting my tongue, of swallowing injustice was now being read aloud by the very woman who had authored most of that cruelty. Diane's voice faltered completely as she reached the final lines, but somehow she pushed through. "If Amanda is in that room listening, I hope she finally understands that she was always my legacy. Not the money, not the house, not the cars, but her." And just like that, it was over. Silence, again. But this time, it wasn't an awkward silence. It was a silence that crackled with exposed nerves and undone illusions. Blackwood, ever the master of timing, chose that moment to speak, and then he said, "Smooth as glass concludes Mr. Morrison's final communication on the matter. There are no appeals. The trust is irrevocable." A shudder ran visibly through Diane's carefully maintained posture. Brandon shot up from his chair, voice rising into a near shout. "So what, we just lose everything overnight after all we—" "All you what?" I cut in quietly, but the steel in my voice sliced right through his protest. He froze, looking at me as if he were seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. And maybe he was. Because I wasn't the outsider anymore. Ms. Carter stepped forward again, her presence precise, almost ghost-like, but undeniable. "Amanda," she said politely, "the cars are being returned to the garage this afternoon. Would you like security to supervise the property transition?" The word security sent an unmistakable ripple of panic through Chloe and Brandon. Their expressions turned frantic. Diane stayed seated, but her gaze was on me now, finally meeting my eyes without her usual armor. For the first time, there was something behind her look that I couldn't quite name, not defiance, not superiority, something closer to fear. But even that didn't matter anymore. I stood slowly, deliberately. My legs felt strong, steady in a way they hadn't felt for years in this family's presence. I slipped Dad's ring back onto my finger, feeling its familiar weight, its significance. This wasn't just metal, it was history, it was belonging. It was proof. Then I turned to Blackwood. "Yes," I said calmly, "please arrange security. I want their departure to be smooth and complete." A flicker of approval crossed Blackwood's face as if he appreciated the precision of my language. But then I paused because there was still one more thing. I looked back at Diane and lowered my voice so it was almost intimate. "I hope you enjoyed the past 14 months, I said. "Because starting now, every single penny they spent, every vacation, every car payment, every upgrade, is subject to review." Chloe gasped. Brandon paled. Diane's mask broke completely. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. But I smiled, not cruelly, but knowingly. "Oh, Diane," I murmured, "you always underestimated me." And then I left the room. As I stepped into the marble hallway, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Ms. Carter sent quietly under the table as the scene inside unfolded. I swiped it open. It read simply, "You asked about offshore accounts. We found them, and we'll talk tomorrow." My fingers tightened instinctively around the phone as a shiver ran through me. Offshore accounts. So Diane had been playing a longer game after all. This wasn't over. Not yet. The moment the heavy oak doors of Blackwood's conference room closed behind me, the air felt different, lighter, yes, but electric with possibility and threat. My fingers still tingled from gripping my phone, that one-line text from Ms. Carter echoing in my mind like a siren. "You asked about offshore accounts. We found them, and we'll talk tomorrow." I walked through the marble hallway slowly, deliberately, heels tapping against the polished floor with a rhythm I controlled now. Every portrait on the walls, somber, judgmental faces of old money men seemed to look at me differently as I passed. Not a curiosity anymore, not the poor relation. I was the one carrying the weight of this family's name and legacy. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Diane had been clever enough to plot an entire lifestyle on what she thought she'd secured. But she had always underestimated me, and Harold. What I hadn't expected was the lengths she might have gone to protect her version of security. Offshore accounts. The words alone were enough to set off alarms. Hidden assets, potential tax evasion, financial concealment. This could be bigger than inheritance disputes. This could cross into criminal territory. I made my way to the elevator, pausing for a moment before stepping inside. The polished brass reflected my face back at me, calm but sharp-eyed. For the first time in a long time, I saw myself not as the outsider to this legacy, but its guardian. As the elevator descended, my mind spun with the implications. What had Diane stashed away? How far did this deception go, and how much had Brandon and Chloe known or even helped orchestrate? Outside on the street, New York pulsed with life taxi horns blaring, tourists photographing everything, the scent of roasted chestnuts mixing with exhaust fumes. But inside me there was a silence, a focus. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and dialed immediately. Not Blackwood, not Ms. Carter. Tara, my oldest friend. Tara, who had warned me from the very beginning not to trust Diane. Who had told me years ago that one day Diane's schemes would collapse under their own weight. "Hey," she answered, her voice warm and familiar. "I need your help," I said without preamble. "Tomorrow, early. Can you come to my place?" A pause, then no hesitation. "Of course, what's going on?" "I can't explain over the phone yet," I said, scanning the street automatically. "But it's big, bigger than I thought." There was a beat of silence, then Tara's voice steady as ever. "I'll be there. Coffee or tea?" "Coffee," I replied. "We might need a lot of it." When I hung up, I slipped the phone back into my coat and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. This was about unearthing everything Diane had buried. By the time I reached my brownstone, a stately building Harold himself had helped me secure years ago, long before Diane entered the picture the night was falling. The familiar brass key turned smoothly in the lock, and I stepped inside, greeted by the warm scent of cedar from the fireplace logs stacked by the hearth. But even here in this safe space, my mind couldn't rest. Dad's ring on my finger felt heavier than usual, almost as if it too carried secrets waiting to be discovered. I walked to the window, staring out at the city lights, allowing the quiet to settle over me for just a few moments. Then I heard it a chime, an email, from Ms. Carter. I sat at my desk and opened it. No greeting, no wasted words, just a subject line. Preliminary report Diane's offshore holding, and one attachment. The document loaded slowly, almost tauntingly, but as soon as it appeared on screen, my breath hitched. There were 5 accounts, registered in foreign jurisdictions, dating back almost 15 years. Some of them opened just months after Diane married my father. And the totals, staggering. Tens of millions. My stomach tightened. All this time, while Diane had spun her story of keeping the estate in the immediate family, she had been quietly siphoning assets abroad. And there was more. At the bottom of the document, beneficiaries listed Diane Morrison, Chloe Morrison, Brandon Morrison. Not Harold. Not even a passing reference to him. Every dollar she had funneled away was meant for her and her children alone. This was theft on a scale Harold might have suspected but clearly couldn't prove during his lifetime. I sat back, the chair creaking softly beneath me like the symbol of Dad's ring. His legacy felt sharper than ever now. He hadn't just entrusted his estate to me. He had entrusted me to protect the very integrity of it. But what stunned me most wasn't just Diane's betrayal. It was how deliberately she had laid this groundwork long before Harold fell ill. For 15 years, she had engineered a shadow financial empire hiding behind his name while slowly draining everything he built. And now it was all exposed. At least to me. Not yet to the authorities. Not yet to Blackwood. Not yet to the world. The weight of this decision settled in. How far was I willing to go? This wasn't just about reclaiming a house or a bank account anymore. This was about justice, about truth, and about dismantling Diane's empire piece by piece in full view of everyone who had ever doubted me. I closed the laptop gently and stood. The living room was silent but felt alive, filled with echoes of every family dinner I had been excluded from, every birthday they had ignored, every look of condescension I had endured, and now every secret they had tried to bury. Tomorrow this would escalate. Tomorrow I would meet with Ms. Carter and we would prepare the next move. But tonight I would rest, because the battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I turned toward the stairs, my phone buzzed again. A text. From an unknown number. It read simply, "You think you've won. You haven't seen what's coming." The chill that ran through me was instant and undeniable. I didn't recognize the number. But the message was unmistakably from Diane or someone working for her. They weren't done. Not yet, and neither was I. I stood still for a long moment staring at that text. "You think you've won. You haven't seen what's coming." No name, no signature, just those words, sharp and chilling. A familiar weight settled low in my chest, like the feeling I used to get as a child whenever Diane would lower her voice and lean close, smiling sweetly, even as she delivered the cruelest remarks. But this wasn't a veiled insult at a dinner table. This was a warning, and I refused to let it rattle me. Instead, I tapped a screenshot of the message, saved it carefully, and sent it directly to Ms. Carter with a simple note. "Add this to our file. Whoever sent it is watching." Then I set my phone down deliberately and took a breath. No rush, no panic. The night was mine now, and tomorrow I would respond not emotionally but strategically. The next morning, before dawn had even softened the Manhattan skyline, Tara arrived exactly as promised. She came bearing coffee, a bag of warm bagels, and a look that told me she already sensed how serious this was. Tell me everything, she said as soon as she stepped inside, not bothering with small talk. We sat by the window, the cold gray light creeping across the floor, and I walked her through it all: the trust, the assets, the offshore accounts, the hidden money, and now the text. As I spoke, Tara's brow furrowed deeper, her fingers tightening around her coffee mug. "Diane's desperate," she said finally. "This message isn't just petty, it's a signal. She's about to make a move." "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I need your help." Tara wasn't just my closest friend. She was also brilliant with digital research, a former investigative journalist who now worked in compliance consulting. If there was a paper trail to follow, she'd find it. Without hesitation, she pulled out her laptop. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Dates, transfers, anything suspicious." As we pieced through the documentation Ms. Carter had provided, Tara's eyes caught something I'd almost missed. "These transfers here," she said, pointing to a series of wire movements. "Look at the dates. This isn't just skimming money after she married Harold. Some of these accounts were opened before they were married." My stomach clenched. Before Harold. Before Diane even had a legal tie to the family. She'd been planning this from the very start, probably from the moment she met him. Tara kept scrolling, her fingers moving fast over the keyboard. Amanda. She used shell companies. What kind of shell company? Tara tilted the screen so I could see layered accounts, some registered in Panama, some in Luxembourg, each obscuring the next. But they all traced back eventually to one point of origin, a Delaware corporation. A chill ran through me, Bo. A Delaware company, I asked. That's so ordinary. Exactly, Tara said. It's a classic move. Diane's no criminal mastermind. She used cookie-cutter offshore tactics to hide money in plain sight, banking on no one ever looking closely. That was her arrogance, her flaw. She thought no one would ever question her. But now we had the map. And just as Tara was about to dig deeper, my phone buzzed again. Another text. From Blackwood this time. Come to the office. Urgent. Diane has filed an injunction. An injunction. A legal grenade thrown exactly as she was being cornered. I grabbed my coat, slipping Dad's ring securely back onto my finger, a talisman now more than a symbol. I turned to Tara. Come with me. She didn't hesitate, of course. Minutes later, we were in a cab racing toward Blackwood's firm. My mind ran through every possibility. Was she trying to freeze the trust? Challenge Harold's will, retroactively claim undue influence. As soon as we stepped into Blackwood's office, his face told me this was worse than I'd imagined. She's filed an emergency petition, he explained, spreading documents across his massive desk. Claiming you manipulated Harold into setting up the trust. Financial coercion, elder abuse. The words felt surreal. She's accusing me of coercion. Blackwood's nod was grim. And she's filed it strategically, knowing it will cause immediate scrutiny. The courts take these allegations seriously. Of course they did. This was Diane's real weapon, doubt. The social stigma, even the faintest whiff of impropriety, would erode my position, delay everything. Give her time to regroup, hide assets further. She's playing the narrative game, Tara said quietly from beside me. And she's counting on her advantage in public perception. Blackwood tapped a file. But we have something she doesn't. Proof. The timeline of those offshore transfers. Evidence they started before her marriage. If we act quickly, we can petition to freeze her accounts globally. My pulse was racing, but I kept my voice calm. How quickly? Today, Blackwood said. But we'll need you to sign an affidavit immediately, and Amanda, this will go public. The reminder was clear. Diane wasn't just waging a legal war. She was about to drag my name through the mud tabloids, social circles, the kind of scandal that lived forever online. And I was ready. I don't care, I said firmly. We fight this head-on, no secrets, no delays. For the first time since we sat down, Blackwood allowed himself a genuine smile. Good, he said, because I've already drafted the motion. At that moment, Ms. Carter appeared in the doorway. There's something else, she said, her voice low but urgent. An anonymous source called the front desk. I turned sharply, and they claimed to have documents showing how Diane funneled money not just for herself, but for someone else. Blackwood's expression darkened. For who, he asked. Ms. Carter hesitated, then said the name quietly. Brandon. My breath caught. Diane's golden boy, her heir apparent. So this wasn't just about Diane after all. Her son was in it too deeply. The whole facade was cracking. And now we would see exactly how far this rot went. The air inside Blackwood's office felt charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Brandon. That name hung between us like a detonated grenade frozen in the moment before it exploded. My heart thudded steady but heavy. Diane had always held herself up as the puppet master, the architect of control, but now it turned out her golden son wasn't just a passive beneficiary, he was complicit. Blackwood leaned forward, his expression cold and sharp. The anonymous source provided preliminary evidence, emails, wire transfers, signed authorizations, all pointing to Brandon as an active participant in the offshore scheme. Tara, sitting beside me, narrowed her eyes at the stack of papers Ms. Carter now laid carefully on the table. This changes everything, Tara said softly. And she was right. Diane had fought so hard to protect Brandon's image, grooming him as her legacy, parading him as the perfect child. But behind closed doors, he'd been part of the rot all along. For a moment, memories of childhood resurfaced, flashes of family dinners where Brandon mocked me, of smug comments at holidays, of condescension dripping from every word. I had spent so long believing he was simply Diane's favorite, shaped by her cruelty, but innocent of its origins. Now I saw clearly. He hadn't just benefited. He had been building the deception with her. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself again by curling my fingers around Dad's ring, the engraving cool and familiar against my skin. Blackwood's voice cut through the silence. We can't wait. If Brandon was involved, he could already be moving assets further offshore beyond reach. Tara leaned in, her voice calm but decisive. Then we go public. We take control of the narrative before Diane does. We expose the full picture. My pulse steadied. This was risky publicizing. This would bring chaos, reporters at my door, endless speculation, a media storm. But it would also eliminate Diane's greatest weapon, doubt. If I controlled the story, she couldn't rewrite it. I nodded. Draft a statement, release everything we have. Blackwood allowed himself a small smile. It's already in motion. But just as he spoke, Miss Carter's phone chimed quietly. She glanced at the screen, then her eyes widened in surprise. There's another development, she said, her voice careful. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. What is it? Ms. Carter hesitated for just a moment before replying. The anonymous source, they're here, in the lobby. They're asking to speak with Amanda directly. The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. Someone had been watching. Someone who knew more than we did, and they had come directly to me. Without hesitation, I rose. Bring them up. Within minutes, the elevator doors slid open and an older man stepped out wearing a tailored gray suit that was expensive but understated. His hair was silver, his expression unreadable but deliberate. His eyes locked on mine immediately, calm-focused, like he had waited years for this moment. Blackwood straightened. Can we help you? The man spoke directly to me, his voice smooth and confident. My name is Thomas Avery. I was Harold's personal accountant for 35 years. I froze. I had met Harold's lawyers, his financial advisors, even his estate planners. But this name Avery had never come up. Diane had kept him hidden from me, or so I thought. But clearly Harold had trusted him. Thomas stepped forward, extending a slim leather folder. I came because I suspected what Diane would do, he said quietly. Harold prepared for this. He left instructions separate from his will and trust for you, in case Diane ever tried to challenge you or hide assets. His gaze didn't waver. This is what he wanted you to have, and only you. I accepted the folder, my fingers trembling slightly despite myself. The leather was worn but clean with Harold's initials embossed in the corner. Dad's initials. I slipped it open carefully, and inside was a stack of documents unlike anything we'd seen before. Annotated notes in Harold's handwriting, account numbers. I didn't recognize transactions meticulously logged, and a letter addressed to me. I read the first line silently. My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, then the fight has come to you as I always feared it might. A lump rose in my throat. This wasn't just a record. This was a roadmap. Harold had anticipated Diane's moves long before I ever suspected. He had left a trail one she couldn't erase. Beside me, Tara leaned in. Her eyes scanned the pages quickly, and then she looked up, her expression sharp. These aren't just additional accounts, she said. This is a full financial diagram. Diane's web, Brandon's ties, even Chloe's involvement. My stomach twisted. Tara nodded grimly. She had shell accounts as well. Smaller, but they're there. I felt the weight of it all, betrayal layered upon betrayal, but underneath that weight was something stronger. Clarity. This wasn't a family. This was an enterprise of manipulation, and now I had the entire blueprint to dismantle it. Thomas Avery cleared his throat, gently pulling my attention back. There's one final instruction Harold left, he said. He asked me to remind you, control isn't always about winning in court. He met my gaze directly. It's about knowing when to expose everything, and when to let the world do the work for you. His meaning sank in instantly. Harold hadn't just protected me legally. He had anticipated the media war, the reputational battles, the games Diane would play to maintain her facade. And he had prepared me for all of it. This wasn't the endgame yet. It was the prelude to something bigger. I looked at Blackwood, then Tara. We go all the way, I said quietly. Everything. We show the world exactly who they are together. And just as I spoke, my phone lit up again. Another message. No name. Just 2 words. Too late. My blood chilled. What did that mean? Too late, for what? Before I could process it fully, Blackwood's office phone rang sharply, slicing through the tension. His assistant's voice echoed from the other side. Mr. Blackwood? Urgent call from Diane's lawyer. They say Diane has vanished. The word vanished hung in the air like an echo. Blackwood froze, his fingers still hovering above the call button. Tara and Thomas Avery exchanged a glance, one of sharp understanding, not shock. But I felt that single word hit me in the chest. Diane had disappeared. Not just ducked the injunction, not just lawyered up, she was gone. My mind raced. The offshore accounts, the false narratives, the carefully orchestrated manipulation. And now this, the final move of a desperate woman who knew the net was tightening. But there was no time for shock. I snapped back into focus, gripping the edge of Blackwood's polished mahogany desk. When I asked, my voice steady but tight, Blackwood's assistant's voice crackled through the speakerphone. Her attorney says she missed their meeting this morning. Security footage at her building shows her leaving around 4:00 a.m. with one small suitcase. Her phone's off. No credit card activity since. Of course not. Diane wouldn't leave a trail. She was too meticulous for that. I inhaled deeply, letting the weight of the moment settle, and then I spoke with clarity that surprised even me. She's running, I said, but it won't matter. Tara sat forward, tapping quickly on her laptop. Amanda, I can initiate monitoring on all financial activity linked to those accounts. Every transaction flagged. If she tried to access a dime, we'll know, Thomas Avery added quietly. Harold anticipated this possibility. There are contingency clauses in the trust that allow immediate asset freezes globally in the event of fraud or criminal suspicion. I turned to Blackwood. Then let's trigger it, now. His nod was sharp and decisive, already in motion. For all of Diane's cunning, her arrogance had been her undoing. She had underestimated everyone around her for years, including me. And as much as I wanted this to feel like vindication, what settled in my chest wasn't victory. It was something colder, more sobering. This wasn't justice yet. This was only containment. There were still questions. Questions Harold had hinted at but never answered. Why had he tolerated Diane for so long? Why had he allowed her so close even after recognizing her manipulations? And most importantly, what was Brandon's next move? Because even as I watched Diane's empire collapse, I knew this wasn't over. A knock at the door jolted us all. Blackwood's assistant stepped in holding a slim envelope. "This just arrived by courier," she said, her voice careful. "No return address. Marked urgent for Amanda Morrison." I felt my pulse spike. The envelope was thick ivory paper embossed simply with my name. No other markings, no seal. Blackwood handed it to me carefully as if the very object might detonate. Tara leaned close, her eyes sharp but silent. I broke the flap cleanly and slid out a single sheet of paper. A handwritten note, but not in Diane's elegant script. It was Brandon's. And the message was chillingly brief. "You think this ends with her? It doesn't." My breath hitched. Beneath the note was a photograph. A grainy surveillance still clearly taken from a camera I didn't recognize. But I recognized the subject instantly. It was me, walking alone last night, returning to my building. The timestamp was just an hour after Diane's last confirmed sighting. A cold chill spread through my chest and into my limbs. Tara reached for the photograph, instinctively reading my reaction before I could even speak. Her face paled. "Amanda, this means..." Blackwood finished her thought. "Someone has been watching you." This wasn't just a financial war anymore. This was personal. And somewhere out there, Diane vanished. Brandon emboldened, the stakes had changed. I slipped the photograph back into the envelope, folding the note carefully. A war was coming. But this time, it wouldn't just be fought in boardrooms and courtrooms. This time it was about safety, about survival. I looked around the room at the people who had stood beside me, Tara, Thomas, Blackwood. And then I made a decision out loud, my voice resolute and clear. "We finish this," I said, "but we finish it on my terms. No more reaction, no more waiting." And then before anyone could speak, my phone vibrated again. This time a live call. Unknown number. I stared at the screen as it rang and answered. Before I could say a word, a voice spoke. Smooth, chilling. "I told you, you haven't seen what's coming." And then the line went dead. Story 2. My half-brother's failing degrees used up all of my mother's $250,000 fortune. He damaged my door automobile when I saw her, and they had to sell her house to reimburse me. Hello everyone, I'm writing here because I'm at a loss for objective viewpoints and don't know where else to look. I'm Alex, an 18-year-old recent high school graduate. My mother is at the center of this issue. We'll name her Carol, who is in her 40s, and my half-brother Leo, who is 22. Around 5 years ago, when I was 13, my dad died of an unexpected illness. Leo is my mom's kid from a prior relationship, and he and she were married. Although they were never really close, my dad formally adopted Leo when he was a little boy. Dad was a decent man who planned things out. He bequeathed me and Leo a $500,000 trust fund which Carol was to administer. It was supposed to aid in our schooling and life transition. I just learned that at least for me that might not be the case. I am scheduled to begin my studies in the fall at a reputable engineering institution on a half scholarship. Tuition is covered, but living expenses, books, and other charges are not. Carol has prioritized Leo above anything else ever after Dad passed away. It wasn't nuanced. Leo received what he requested. Every time I wanted anything, we had to debate whether I actually needed it or if we could afford it. Her golden kid is Leo. He has always lacked direction. With much discussion of becoming a doctor, he enrolled in college immediately after high school. Carol lavished funds on his pre-med classes. After a year, he concluded that medicine was too taxing. His next career goal was to become an architect. Additional funds were used for materials, new classes, and a high-end laptop that lasted around 18 months. Then he concluded that designing video games once more was his actual calling. Carol was more than delighted to finance this new aspiration. A specialized and costly private arts college with new technology software and courses. Every major change resulted in more expenses, new application costs, and wasted credits. Over the years, I made several attempts to speak with Carol about it, particularly when I observed Leo using his costly devices and vacations with friends as sources of inspiration while I was advised to save my allowance for necessities. She would constantly argue that Leo needed the help and that his father would have wanted him to pursue his vocation. She kept the trust fund a secret as well. She would become defensive and insist that it was being handled appropriately and that I shouldn't be concerned if I inquired about it, even if I was only trying to understand how it operated. Given Leo's lifestyle, I couldn't shake the uneasy sensation that something wasn't quite right. Despite not having a job, he seemed to not care about money at all, drove a newer car, and always had the newest phone. I had a serious conversation about my college money with Carol a few weeks ago following my graduation. I wanted to know how to access my share of the trust and had my scholarship information and a living expenditure and book budget. I estimated that my share was $250,000, of which I intended to invest the remainder after using a modest portion for my first year. She dropped the bomb at that point. She fidgeted a little and then added, "Alex, honey, about the trust fund," seeming uneasy. Actually, hardly much is left. I was taken aback. I questioned her about her meaning. At first, she gently stated that Leo's schooling had been rather costly. She mentioned the cost of living close to his campuses, his several degree attempts, and the specialist game design classes. The supplies he needed had used all of it during his 2 moves. All $500,000. It seemed unbelievable to me. How could that be? I questioned her. How might I lose my share? She said that, because it was a shared fund, she had to decide what was best in her capacity as trustee. She felt that Leo needed this opportunity to discover who he was and that his current career path in game creation was the right one. She really did appear to think that investing the full $500,000 on Leo's convoluted academic path was a sensible use of the money that Dad gave us. At first, I didn't shout. I was too surprised. I asked her whether she knew that I was legally entitled to half of that money. She became defensive. Then she accused me of being unsupportive and challenging to Leo. I didn't need the money as much as Leo, she claimed, because I had a scholarship. I explained to her that the money was my father's bequest and not a supplementary award, and that the scholarship didn't cover everything. She said I was envious of Leo's possibilities and overreacted. The dispute got more heated. "This is stealing," I informed her. That she had appropriated my father's inheritance for herself. Overhearing Leo, who was at home at the time, barged in. He sided with Carol right away, yelling that I was being self-centered, that his work was crucial, and that he would reimburse me eventually. He was a well-known game creator at the time. He told me to quit whining and to be grateful that I was intelligent enough to receive a scholarship. Carol then broke down in tears, claiming that she had done what she believed was right, and that she would be destroyed if I went after this or attempted to get my money back. "I may have to sell the house," she remarked. The house where I grew up was purchased by her and my father. She asserted that the residents would be at risk from any legal action. Her huge emotional blackmail card was this. I went to stay with a friend after leaving the house. I was in a stupor for the next several days trying to come to terms with the betrayal. I began looking up inheritance rights and trust law online. According to what I read, she had seriously violated her fiduciary obligation. About 3 weeks have passed since that discussion. The strain is intolerable. Only a few times have I returned to the residence to get additional belongings. Additionally, Carol always tries to make me feel bad or tears. Leo is blatantly antagonistic. Although I haven't made up my mind yet, I've decided that I can't ignore this any longer. Money isn't the only factor here. It's about the flagrant disrespect for my future and my father's intentions. Carol now alternates between furious accusations and heartfelt apologies without truly acknowledging her guilt. She has been phoning family and accusing me of being avaricious and unappreciative. I'm getting calls from several of them now urging me to forgive her and avoid severing the family over money. Particularly now that I'm receiving the scholarship. Leo is still a work of art, telling anybody who would listen that I'm only envious that he has the opportunity to follow his goals. The house is my mom's primary bargaining point. She keeps threatening that we'll all be homeless and she'll lose it if I sue. Even so, I wouldn't be residing there. I'm not sure whether she mishandled other assets to gain the confidence, or whether the property is truly in jeopardy. Money was only one aspect of a bigger issue. Or perhaps she's only trying to control me by saying that. I feel as though I'm being forced into a difficult situation. My mother's full complicity whip has been used to waste the money my father wished to provide for me on my half-brother. If I hire an attorney and take my mother to court to get my inheritance, despite the fact that she could have to sell the family home as a result. Am I really envious, overreactive, and unsupportive because I desire what my father wanted for me, particularly when my academic expenses are not entirely covered by my scholarship? First of all, I would want to thank everyone who left a remark on my initial article. Among the many messages I got, it was generally agreed that I should see a lawyer. Since several of you requested explanation, I'll attempt to cover the most important ones. Dads will divulge information. Some inquired about the details. According to the terms of my dad's will, Carol would be the only trustee of the $500,000 when it was placed in a trust. According to the rules, it was to be split almost equally between his children, Alex and Leo, for their upbringing, schooling, and general well-being when they grew older or needed money for significant educational costs. The dispersion of 25 clause was not strictly enforced. For justifiable purposes, it was more up to the trustee's judgment. My argument is predicated on the basically equally portion. She was supposed to behave in our best interests. Dream degrees for Leo. Leo's costly education includes pre-med one-year standard university tuition books and lab costs for those who are curious. This architecture was the reason he resided at home. After 1.5 years, he transferred to a different institution with a renowned program, paid more for tuition, purchased pricey software and architectural materials, and lived into a dorm rather than an apartment near the campus. Costs began to skyrocket at this point. Game design has been going on for 2.5 years, reportedly attending a private college of the arts. VR installed a number of software subscriptions on a renowned high-end computer, and he stated that he required a nicer residence to foster creativity. It seems that Carol also covered the cost of a number of networking excursions to game conferences. Given the cost of that arts institution, I calculate conservatively that his last 2 tries may have easily cost over $200K per, including inflated living expenses and all the technology. The first pre-med year isn't even included in this. Carol obviously never said no. Carol's financial circumstances. She holds a mid-level administrative position. Good, but not enough to pay for the home, save the house, and support Leo's lifestyle. Has a mortgage, but a sizable portion of it was paid off by Dad. Dad was obviously the primary financial planner. How she gained unfettered access to the whole trust concept, I'm still learning. However, she probably had a lot of authority as the only trustee. Reading your comments strengthens my determination, particularly the ones that advise me to see this as a legal matter rather than merely a family conflict. Carol is using the scholarship as a red herring to make me feel guilty. Regardless of what else I might do, my dad left me that money. As trustee, it was her responsibility to handle it properly for both beneficiaries, not to favor one over the other. It is obviously a violation to spend it all on one, especially in such a pointless manner. The notion that Leo frittered away my father's hard-earned money at his whim. The more I considered it, the more ridiculous it seemed that I should just be thankful for my scholarship, but I followed the advice. I discovered a lawyer who focuses in lawsuits involving estates and trusts. A lot of you inquired about my ability to pay for this, being 18 and on the verge of enrolling in college. After examining the specifics of Dad's will in this case, the attorney I located provides free introductory consultations. He believed that my case was strong. He consented to accept it on a fee-for-service basis. This implies that if we win, he will only receive a portion of the money recovered. I don't know him for his time if we lose. He stated we could handle immediate costs like court filing fees when they arose, or even postpone the amount. I recruited him because it was the only way I could proceed. Sending Carol a formal letter of demand was the first step. My lawyer wrote the letter, which details her duties as trustee, the breach of those duties, and the demand for a complete accounting of the trust and the prompt restitution of my $250,000 portion within 30 days. Additionally, it specifies that non-compliance would lead to legal action to recoup the money, which may include requesting damages and legal fees. She cannot say she didn't receive it because we delivered it by registered mail. 3 days ago it was delivered, though predicted the strength of the reaction was nevertheless startling. The night Carol received the letter, she gave me a call. She was going crazy. She did more than cry. She let out a scream. She accused me of wanting to make her homeless and impoverished and called me a snake, ungrateful and callous. Leo then picked up the phone. He was terrible. He was screaming that I was a rapacious jerk and that this lawsuit would destroy his future profession since Carol was no longer able to provide for him. He claimed he would have spit on my $250,000 and become a rich game creator, but I had wrecked everything now. He went on to say that I would regret this. He was forceful yet evasive. He concluded by telling him I was dead. After Carol gave me a hard time, my maternal aunt contacted me the next day. She used a more tactful strategy, claiming that Carol was a disaster and that I ought to be sympathetic and end the lawsuit. "Oh, I'm sure she didn't mean to," my aunt remarked when I told her that Carol had wasted my inheritance. She simply became overburdened. Leo has a lot of persuasive power, no responsibility. So we're at that location. The letter of demand has been sent. They draw the lines. There's no going back now. I suppose my attorney advised me to keep a record of all my communications with them going forward. Update 2. I haven't posted in around 4 months, and it has been approximately 4.5 months since I received the legal notice and learned about the bequest. I'm balancing all of this with my engineering coursework since the fall semester has begun. As anticipated, the legal procedure is proceeding slowly and unsightly. Carol disregarded the 30-day demand letter. She didn't restore any money or offer an accounting. The only way she responded was by hiring a lawyer. She basically denied any wrongdoing and claimed that her actions were in the best interests of the beneficiaries, which is absurd considering that she spent all of her money on one. In order to force an accounting and to prosecute Carol for the embezzled money, my attorney filed a petition in probate court. We are now in the process of discovery. This entails formally obtaining any records pertaining to the trust and/or expenditures such as bank statements and receipts. Carol is battling it at every turn. Her attorney is employing every possible delay strategy. They have refused almost all of our requests, provided inadequate information, and missed deadlines for delivering papers. It is quite annoying. This is typical when the defendant has a lot to conceal, according to my attorney. Leo has gone utterly insane. He did need to adjust a few things. Carol's allowance obviously dried up. I am not speaking to anyone who directly supports them based on what I have pieced together from common connections. Carol's inability to pay the rent forced him to give up his posh apartment close to the arts college. Apparently, he has returned to live with her. Additionally, it appears that he has left the game design course or is failing since he is no longer receiving funding for the costly software or fees. He holds me responsible for everything. On social media, he openly called me a thief who was ruining his aspirations. His posts are angry, crass, and full of errors. He even shared a photo of my father on social media claiming that he would be embarrassed by me. That was a deep cut. However, I was encouraged not to engage by my lawyer. The cost of living is high. The scholarship is excellent for tuition, but in a college town, expenses like books, food, and rent may mount up. I work 15 hours a week in the library as a part-time school employee. It's helpful, but I'm always conscious that Carol's actions are the reason for my battle. Dad wanted me to have financial stability, but now it's gone. Trying to concentrate on challenging coursework while this legal struggle rages on is causing a great deal of stress. Last month, the most startling new discovery occurred. Carol suggested a deal and kicked out her lawyer. She proposed to pay a total of $10,000 over 2 years in payments. This was all she could afford, she said, and I should consider it a gesture of goodwill. Naturally, my attorney and I rejected it right away. It was offensive. Things offer felt like a last-ditch effort to have things resolved quickly because it was made after we had given her lawyer some of the damaging bank statements. Leo raged when the offer was turned down. One evening, he appeared outside the building where I live. I had just returned after an extended period of studying. He was waiting at the door looking furious and unkempt. He began yelling at me, calling me derogatory names and threatening to punish me for destroying his life. I thought for a second that he was going to get physical when he came right up in my face. He was virtually spitting in anger and clenched his hands. When my neighbor occurred to emerge and seen what was going on, he shouted at Leo to stop bothering me. Leo retreated, yelled a few more curse words, and then bounded away. I felt shook. I gave his identity to the police when I reported the event, and what took place. They took a report, but they stated they couldn't do anything about it unless he hit me. Since my lawyer warned Carol's attorney about Leo's actions and threatened to file for a restraining order if the harassment continued, I've been considerably more watchful of my surroundings. Carol's approach appears to be to stonewall and play the victim. She's telling family members that I'm making her go through a costly and stressful legal procedure and that I'm being unreasonable by not accepting her apology, which she never did for the little settlement offer and the financial theft. The family is essentially divided. My dad's side of the family is very supportive and angry on my behalf. They have been back in touch more since this began. Mom's side is mostly supporting her position or remaining neutral. The battle is not yet done. My attorney is already drafting a motion to punish Carol for disobedience and to force her to give the comprehensive, in-depth accounting that we have asked. Every step forward seems like a struggle, my dad. Update 3, another 8 months have gone by, making it a full year when I originally asked if I would be the jerk for suing my mother. After my first year, the university is currently on summer holiday. Both academically and psychologically, the year was a trial by fire. After months of delays and roadblocks from Carol and her attorney, the legal struggle has become much more intense. Our request to require complete accounting and to impose fines was ultimately heard. Carol's justifications did not impress the court. He gave her a 15-day deadline to provide all needed trust financial papers. When they did come, the documents were in disarray, haphazard, and lacking in several areas. However, what was revealed even more obvious instances of flagrant partiality and severe poor management. It wasn't limited to Leo's authorized schooling costs and tuition. Records show that she used trust funds to pay off Leo's credit card bills, which were full of unnecessary expenditures, redecorate his room at her house, and even make what seems to be a down payment on a new automobile for him a few years ago. Well over $400,000 was spent specifically on or for Leo. There was no sign of the remaining sum. Probably went toward her personal general household expenses, which she was not authorized to utilize trust monies for. Negotiations for a settlement failed. Following the judge's directive, her attorney came up to us once again. Carol offered $50,000 this time, saying that in order to pay it, she would need to take out a second mortgage on the property. My lawyer suggested that we pursue the whole $250,000 plus interest and legal expenses because of the strength of our evidence and the obvious violation. In response, we demanded $275,000 to partially pay the interest that we had estimated. They declined. Thus, late fall has been chosen as the testing date. In addition to what she owes me, it has come to light that Carol has very few other assets, which puts her property in danger. She seemed to be changing her defense as well. My lawyer claims that my ignorance of the responsibilities of being a trustee is not a good excuse for misusing the funds. Leo's condition has gotten worse. He's not at school. He is not employed. It appears that he spends the most of his time at home, which probably makes Carol's life miserable as well. He keeps up his internet tirades, but less people appear to be listening, even if I don't feel sorry for her. However, in a more overt manner, he escalated as harassment. When I returned to my apartment around 2 months ago, I discovered that my front door had been vandalized. It was spray-painted with big red letters and the words, "Money-grubbing thief." Additionally, my previous automobile, which was parked on the street, had a lengthy damage along the side. There were no witnesses or cameras in the corridor of my flat. I recognized Leo. The phrasing was taken directly from his social media post, however, I was unable to verify it. I submitted a second police report. Although they had no evidence, the trend this time appeared to worry them a bit more. Nothing. I had to deal with a scratch on my car and pay to have the door repainted. It was eerie. I felt uncomfortable in my own home because of it. Shortly after the trial date was established, Carol had her most dramatic breakdown. She wrote me a lengthy, meandering, and hostile email after somehow obtaining my university email address, likely from an old contact list. She accused me of being a monster on those pages. I've attempted to ruin her and to disdain my father's memory by destroying his family. She says the stress I was giving her was causing her health issues. In contrast to my current betrayal, she described all the sacrifices she made for me as a child, primarily fundamental parental obligations. The email was filled with guilt and self-pity, and it made no mention of what she had done with the trust monies. She concluded by saying that she would never forgive me and that it would always be on my mind if she lost the house. Then around 3 weeks ago, Leo committed his most insane deed. For once, Carol contacted me and sounded truly worried. Leo had a meltdown, she claimed. He had apparently cut his arm slightly with a kitchen knife after arguing with her once more, most likely over money or his lack of opportunities. Not fatal, but sufficient to cause blood loss and necessitate sutures. He went on to tell Carol that I was to blame for pushing him to this point by denying him his future. Carol called me, but there was a tinge of, "Look what you made happen," even though she didn't directly blame me for his behavior. What did she want me to do? Leo would miraculously recover if the case were dropped. After being brought to the hospital, he was sutured and placed under a 72-hour mandated mental stay. Carol's attorney attempted to exploit this event to ask for a trial postponement, pointing to Carol's emotional anguish about her son's welfare, which is how my lawyer learned about it. The delay was rejected by the judge. Now the treachery seems comprehensive and complex. Money isn't the only factor, it's the assassination of the character, the facilitation of Leo's harmful conduct, and the emotional blackmail. And now this attempt to influence the justice system by using his self-inflicted injuries. The battle goes on. My attorney is getting ready for the trial. I'm getting ready to testify. There is no way to go back. To be honest, I have long since given up on ever having a normal connection with them. It all comes down to taking back what is rightfully mine and making Carol answerable for her deeds. Update 4, another 1.5 years has passed since the start of this whole ordeal. When I inquired about my inheritance with my mother, I am now in the middle of my 3rd year of college. For the most part, the legal struggle has ended. Last November, the trial took place. 3 days passed. In court, Carol's defense was just as weak as it appeared on paper. Her attempts to come across as a bewildered, overburdened widow who just misinterpreted her responsibilities failed. My lawyer provided the precise conditions of the trust, as well as a wealth of financial data demonstrating the deliberate depletion of assets for Leo's advantage and other non-trust uses. On the stand, Carol sobbed. Her attorney did not summon Leo as a witness, most likely due to the fact that he would have been a liability. I was required to testify. I talked about the conversation where Carol disclosed that the money was gone, as well as my dad and his objectives as I understood them. I tried to be as cool as possible as I gave the facts. Her attorney attempted to portray me as vengeful and greedy. I keep bringing up my scholarship. However, my attorney successfully argued that Carol's violation of fiduciary responsibility was unrelated to my scholarship. Approximately 6 weeks following the trial, the judge handed down his decision. The entire $250,000 in pre-judgment interest was awarded to me, making the total little over $280,000. But getting the money has been another story. Since we believed Carol's primary asset was the property, she did not have the money on hand. At first, she wouldn't sell it. My lawyer had to put a lien on the house for months in order to start enforcement actions. She applied for loans and did everything she could to avoid selling. She was unable to ask for a bailout from her family. Nobody could or would pay for that sum. I heard that Leo was quite angry. His luxurious life was genuinely ended not because his mother was in jeopardy. After the mortgage was paid off and the sale's legal fees were subtracted, the house was eventually sold under pressure around 4 months ago. I didn't receive the entire money since there was enough to satisfy around $220,000 of the judgment that was due to me. Carol had very little left. We could go after her for the remaining $60,000 according to my lawyer, but she doesn't have any substantial assets and her salary is minimal. The legal expenses would continue to rise for me, and it would be like pulling blood from a stone. Since the $220,000 was the most I was expected to get back, I made the decision to minimize my losses. That concludes the narrative. A sizable amount of my fortune was returned to me, but at a hefty cost. Only charred ground. I would want to express my gratitude to everyone on this forum who first offered me guidance and encouragement. It gave me the courage to make that initial move. This is the last update. Regarding Carol and Leo, nothing more can be said. I made my decisions, and they made theirs. All I have to do now is concentrate on my own future, the one that my father would have wished me to construct.